I was wanting to make this video a while back ago, but things have been so busy. I've been working on a lot of projects. My apologies. I'm going to get on a lot of topics on this channel, and everything I want to talk about wants to be I want to have it from a biblical perspective. But like I say, I'll get into many different topics that I feel like are important, and maybe other people aren't covering, not just the typical noise and low hanging fruit stuff that you get a lot on YouTube and social media. But I think about a month ago, if any of you who've been looking at the news and paying attention to current events, the United States had Canada hold a Chinese national who's the daughter, I believe, one of the Chinese oligarchs, and she's the CFO, if I'm not mistaken, of the Huawei company that deals with telecommunications. And the United States is saying that the reason why they're having her being held for possible extradition to the United States is because she violated some of the sanctions dealing with Iran and the whole nuclear deal. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much, but for those of you who've been keeping up on these things, now technically, I thought there wasn't supposed to be a deal, because even though President Obama made a framework, the Iranians never really signed anything. They never agreed to anything. There was a framework of a deal, but there's not an actual deal. That's just like, say, if you're looking to buy a house or if you're looking to buy a car. They could pull up a contract, or they could pull up a buyer's invoice. Now, that's the framework to the deal. But until you sign, put ink, and certify that contract, there's no deal. There's just the framework of the deal, or the presentation of a deal. But the deal isn't done unless it's signed. So I don't believe the Iranians ever signed anything. So just because the international community tried to put a framework together, if the Iranians never agreed to anything, technically there is no deal. Therefore, how could anyone violate any of these sanctions without a deal, unless maybe they signed on to something, or they did a separate deal that isn't based upon the condition of what the Iranians may or may not do. But anyway, so the U.S. is having her being held. Now, of course, obviously, you know how China operates. China was really upset. They demanded that this Chinese national, one of their own, be released. They denounced the U.S., they denounced Canada, and they demand her release. Canada, particularly the Prime Minister Trudeau, he said, okay, well, this is all the judicial process. We're not getting involved. We're not going to interfere. This is a legal matter. We're going to let our court system play this out with the local laws that we have in our country, as well as international law. And then I was just sitting there thinking to myself, like, you know what? As they had threatened, China's going to do something about this. They're not just going to sit back here and take this, especially the way Trump is doing all this stuff with with the tariffs and trade. Lo and behold, didn't take too long when I heard the news about a former Canadian diplomat that was missing and in the custody of the Chinese authorities. I was like, okay, here we go. Then there was a second former Canadian diplomat who was being held. Then there was a third situation where it was a teacher, just a regular citizen, regular civilian, no one who I don't believe was working with the government. I think she was with an NGO dealing with education. And she was missing. Her family wasn't able to get into contact with her. Then finally they were able to make contact. China said, oh, well, there's some issues with her visa working here in the country. And then she was deported because they said something was invalid or had expired with her visa. Or I think they said her visa was with one employer. She was working with another school, but then she started working at a different school perhaps. So therefore, the visa was null and void, and they said she got to go. Now, Canada has been trying to be, diplomatic about this, but it doesn't take anyone to realize this is retaliatory, okay? Now, one of the things that we're going to end up talking about on this channel is traveling, moving abroad, seeing other countries, having passports, having the finances, the economic freedom and mobility to be able to do those things, seeing other countries and getting outside of this, the so-called United States. And that's as well for the brothers and sisters out there that are in other parts of the world who are part of the diaspora, who are living in countries right now that essentially are being ran by colonizers. So, getting out of the territory of the colonizers, or at least hooking up, linking up, and getting into situations where we can live in the best environment possible for ourselves, where we could be together as a people and build up our own communities and not have to be dependent upon white society, But the State Department probably isn't going to make too much of a big deal about this. And I don't want to scare anyone and say, well, if you're an American or if you're a Canadian or if you're a Westerner, that you're in harm being in China. But let's be very honest. I mean, we have a lot of bad things going on in some of these other countries, but we know how China is with the one-party system, the communist system, the oligarchy, and all the surveillance that they have going on in China. Now, in the United States, other places, there's surveillance, but I think China maybe does it more than, especially for a nation of that size, with a military, with a first-rate economy. I think China maybe does it more than any other nation that's at that level economically and militarily on the world stage. So I don't care what these state departments or state agencies or foreign agencies are saying. I'm just putting out this PSA. I know there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there. You're traveling, you have business affairs going on, you have your passports, and you're seeing different places across the world. But I'm going to put out a travel warning, particularly for those who are American nationals and Canadian nationals. Because right now what's going on with this Huawei executive mainly involves the United States and Canada. Do not go and travel to China. China should be off limits. China is a no-go. And I'm just putting this out as a warning because let's see how this continues to go on. Right now, she's the executive. She's on bail. She's on home restriction. She has security watching her. She has a tracking device on her ankle. But she still hasn't been released, and they're still pending this extradition to the United States. So Canada is still holding her right now. So right now it's just been 3 people, 3 Canadians that China has come down on. But depending on how this thing goes and this stuff with Trump and trade and the tariffs, you never know where this thing is going to go. So when you travel, you should always do your homework. Do your research. I mean, I don't like to get too much caught up in a lot of the politics as far as being reactionary to what's going on, because a lot of that stuff is for show. It's all a charade. It's all facade. It's a distraction. But at the same time, you need to pay attention to what's going on in these places, where you live as well. But you need to pay attention to what's going on and know what you need to do some intelligence, okay? Gather some intelligence. Find out what's going on. That way you have an intelligence report for yourself. And whether if you're moving about locally or if you're moving abroad, you know what the situation is like. You've done your homework. You've done your research. You looked into current events, current affairs. You maybe know some people who have been there or who live there. They've given you the scoop on some things. Do your homework before you go to these places. I always check things out before I make my movements. I'm just not going to show up anywhere. But like I say, this is my advisement. I guess you're going to consider me your State Department or your Foreign Department attaché. And for all the brothers and sisters in the diaspora, especially US, Canada, China is a no-go, okay? That country is very strict, very rigid, very strident, very authoritative government. And right now, for Americans and Canadians, it's probably not a good choice. And if you start to see more people going missing or people being rounded up, people being kicked out, people being deported, people having their visas canceled, people having passports pulled and things like that, you're just going to know this is more this retaliation, because that's just what it is now. They're not going to go to war with anyone. Economically, they already do what they do as far as trade or stealing property or intellectual property, corporate espionage. They're already doing that. Spying and hacking. There's things that they're already doing, so they can't really do anything else. Soft power, it's called, to really flex their muscles. And they're not really going to go out there and do anything big time militarily, but they will crack down on visitors, travelers, vacationers, foreigners, who they have there. So this is a warning, PSA. If you want to go to Asia, maybe consider the Philippines or something. Japan, maybe, although I hear there's too many travelers going there now and it's, too hot and you need to let it breathe a little bit because they just have too many tourists. But, there's a lot of other Asian countries you go to. You go to the Philippines, you go to the Peloponnesian Islands or something like that, or one of these Pacific islands. But China is a no-go. So remember, do your homework, gather an intelligence report, be smart, be safe. Shalom, family.